This week on the TT show, the 30 FPS versus 60 FPS debate continues as another major Xbox game ditches performance for graphics. Next-gen Radeon rumors heat up, Razer launches a $200 controller, LG teases new Dream OLED tech, GeForce RTX 4070 downgrade, Sony's latest game flops big time, and much, much more. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the TT show. My name is Jak Connor. I'm a hardware editor over at Tweaktown, and today I'm joined by my co-host,
Kosta Andriadis, gaming hardware editor at Tweaktown.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. A busy week of, a big week of news.
This is a huge week of news.
Surprisingly big.
This is, I was just thinking about, we just went past Gamescom. This week is bigger than the Gamescom week.
Yeah.
In terms of like the impact of these stories that are coming out. We have everything from, as you would have heard in the intro, from tragic takes from art directors, new GPU news. We've got Age of Mythology, Apple stories, Nintendo rumors. Like, oh my god, Black Myth Wukong. Like, wow. And we haven't even got to like some of the, my personal favorites, like Peter Jackson officially returning to Middle Earth.
And there's also the LG's new OLED technology that I think you'll be excited because it's like a game changer that could mean that all OLED displays like a year from now are just going to be like, level 10 or like a max level character in an RPG versus like a low level noob for current OLEDs. And current OLEDs are amazing, right? So
yeah,
to make those guys look like a noob.
Oh my god, I can't wait. All right, let's dive straight in. Let's talk 30. Yeah, Avowed. Honestly, if you've been following along with the show, you have probably picked up. I'm not the biggest fan of 30 FPS.
I mean, but who is a big fan of 30 FPS?
Yeah, I think it is. I think we've stated our case pretty clearly. Like, it's okay for handheld games. Like, it's
that's right.
Like we can warrant it there. Like if you can move your device around, it's portable, and you're gaming on the go. 30 FPS it's okay. Look, it's the bare minimum. Let's just say that it's the absolute like bare minimum.
The wow factor of playing a game like God of War on the Steam Deck, right? And you're like, okay, I've hit 30, but like it's just the wow factor of playing that sort of game on like a handheld, even like with the Switch or whatever. It's like Zelda on the go. You're like, amazing, right? The fact that you can sit in a train and play it, and then you're willing to make that sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
So the debate in the console space like goes back like years, right? Like I played games at 30 FPS and was fine with it. Like, when you grow up with the N64 and GameCube and things like that. But 60 FPS isn't like this new thing either, right? Because like if you look at the Super Nintendo or like Mario Kart 64, right? Like these were games that were built for old school CRT displays, like, TVs, giant TV boxes before everything went flat screen and super thin. And those TVs were in the Northern Hemisphere, like 60 hertz. Here in Australia, they were like 50 hertz. We had PAL, which is what it was called, which is like a weird thing. So Australians are kind of like used to being downgraded with performance. So our games ran at like 50 hertz. But for most people, like in America and Europe, or maybe not Europe, sorry, like America and Japan, they were playing games, throughout the 90s and 80s at 60 hertz, which is essentially 60 FPS. So this is not like some new thing that is only limited to PCs with high-end GPUs. It's like, 60 FPS has always been a smoother way to play games. And games like Mario Kart or games like Street Fighters or like fighting games where, the faster the frame rate, the lower the response times. And, it's just a smoother sort of experience. And you kind of like need that for competitive games, but then that filters down to every other game. Like if it's good for a competitive game, it's good for every other game.
Yeah, there is a bell curve when it comes to frame rate in games. I believe it starts at 30, like as in that is the bare minimum. I don't want to play any game in movie 24 FPS or what is it, 23.97 to be technical.
Yeah, like the film.
Yeah. And that is purely because there isn't enough data on the screen for me to be able to comfortably move the camera without throwing up. So there is and film has taken the route, and I'm not sure if it is because of the way that it's always been done, to include they almost direct around and with this motion blur, this natural motion blur of a low frame rate. But this isn't good for games. This is because I've like, there's that movie with Will Smith where I think everything's in like 100 FPS, and it looks bizarre. It
just looks weird.
It looks weird when you're shooting at a low FPS. The blur of the background, you can really control the focus of the viewer.
Yeah, and like a slow pan.
Yes,
like the reason why you do a slow pan is to keep everything in focus, right? Like a fast camera movement is disorienting because of the motion blur and the fact that you're not getting motion clarity.
Yes.
Games are completely different, right? So like when you, like Will Smith movie, like people would say, oh, that looks like a video game. And they say that because it's too smooth, right? Like the movement is too, like it doesn't feel like a movie. It feels more like a game. And
yeah, you go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, like, you know, leading into Avowed, right? Like it's a first-person game, and first-person games, like you're saying, like it, you know, if it's a low frame rate, you feel like throwing up because the first-person perspective is like an extra layer of immersion, right? Like you become the character when you switch to like a first-person view. Like, you know, that's why like games like Doom in the 90s and stuff like that. It's like, oh, you know, that first-person perspective was like a whole new level of immersion. And when it comes to that, the higher the frame rate, the better, right? So if you're playing a shooter, like if you're playing Counter-Strike now in 2024 at 60 FPS, you would consider that the bare minimum. Like you
definitely
would prefer to play at 100 plus because of when you're moving the camera really fast, the faster the frame rate, the better the motion clarity. And so like, you know, that's why like, you know, 200 FPS is great for a shooter. 300 is even better. Like you can play Overwatch 2 at 300 plus FPS on a high-end GPU, and that's a better experience than 60. You wouldn't even consider playing that game at 30.
Yeah, the games that you would consider playing, like I would, there's obviously a payoff when it comes to frame rate and graphics. You have to choose. Like with an increase in graphics, you get less frames, but you decrease graphics, you get more frames. But if I'm playing games like Cyberpunk, all of like Black Myth Wukong, any other really like slower RPG style games, I don't need 100 FPS. I can do 60. I can do ideally I like to target between 70 and 100, like with 70 being my like
70
lowest lows. And then in less demanding situations, hopefully I'm hitting around 100. That's where I put Black Myth Wukong, and that game is completely maxed out, and I'm running it on the 4090, completely maxed out with all the ray tracing features, and I get anywhere between 60 and 100 FPS. And I'm like, 4K. That's in 4K, ray tracing, everything is just geared up to the max, and it looks incredible. But if it drops below 60, I'm not gonna, like, I'm gonna turn some graphics down so I can get it above. Now this leads into the Avowed story, and the team behind this, the art director, the art director Matt Hansen sat down for an interview, and his take is that we don't actually need 60 FPS for Avowed, which is a first person, extremely graphically demanding. This game looks incredible. It looks unbelievable. It looks unbelievable, but I don't know how good it's going to look when I spin the camera in first person at 30 FPS.
I would advise against that. Now, Avowed is from Obsidian, right? So this is one of their main teams, and Obsidian obviously developed Fallout New Vegas. They developed The Outer Worlds. So this is a first-person fantasy RPG, and the latest gameplay from it from Gamescom has presented it just looks so much better than its initial debut. and early impressions from people that have played it saying it's amazing, but they were playing on PC, and so I'm assuming that was like running at a faster frame rate, and it just looks great, like the art direction and stuff like that. And even Nvidia has come out to say that the PC version has got full ray tracing. They released a trailer, and if you haven't seen that ray tracing trailer, it looks stunning with ray tracing, right? And so it's going to be like, it is going to be a visually impressive game.
Yeah,
And
it reminds me of Avatar.
yeah, exactly. It's really vibrant and colorful, and it's an RPG set in the Pillars of Eternity universe. And I played the first 2 Pillars of Eternity games. They're kind of like old school isometric.
That's up
top
your
down,
alley. Yeah, that's up your alley.
Like CRPGs, like the very first Baldur's Gate type games, like Fallout 2, like that sort of isometric RPG. And they're brilliant games with great stories and all that sort of mechanics. And this is kind of like almost like a Skyrim version of that, but like scaled back to be like a smaller world with more choice, story driven. But there is like a lot of combat, and the combat looks fast paced and really, really cool. So the art director basically saying that on Xbox, they're pushing the visual fidelity, right? So the latest trailers look great. And because they're pushing the visual fidelity, they're saying that, well, we're just focused on that and ensuring that the game runs at 30 FPS.
That is, yeah, Hansen made these comments on the Iron Lords podcast, where he stated Obsidian was, quote, targeting 30 frames per second, end quote, for its upcoming title Avowed, and that this has been the FPS target since the early stages of the game's development. He said that we don't necessarily need 60 FPS for a first-person title. I think this is a horrible take. Honestly, I think this is a take that I think if you are ever making the decision between performance and graphics, you should more often than not, you should be choosing performance, because no one cares about playing a tech demo. The game needs to run good before it's even considered. Don't you think?
Sorry, one sec. Can we just pause? I got a delivery.
Sure. Yes.
Live
we'll
delivery.
We'll be right back. Okay. Sorry about that. We are back. Kosta just received a present from a unknown company. But perhaps we'll talk about that in the future. Yes, back to the 30 FPS versus 60 FPS debate. I don't like this take. I think this kind of argument holds back. I think this is kind of like a cop-out, I reckon. I don't know. It really rubs me the wrong way, because games coming out in 2024 at 30 FPS, this is a first-party Xbox title. What are we doing? The console is capable of 120 FPS.
Yes, and that brings us to, like, go back to 2020, right? So before the Xbox Series X came out, which is the flagship console, and there's also the Series S, which is the more affordable version now, which is like a 1440p sort of like max console.
Yeah.
Aaron Greenberg, who's one of the heads of the Xbox team, I think like with the marketing and stuff like that, he came out about 5-6 months before the Xbox Series consoles came out and said that 60 FPS is the new standard, and that the Xbox Series X will be able to push up to 120 FPS. So what happened at that point is that they set the expectation, right? That that 60 FPS is the standard, right? And that the Xbox could even go even higher than that. And when the consoles came out, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, a lot of the first party games had 2 modes, quality or performance. And, you could play, like even on the Sony side, like Spider-Man had like the ray tracing 30 FPS mode or the performance mode. And most people stuck with the performance mode because it's just a smoother, more fluid experience. And so that sets the expectation. And like you said, this is a Xbox game. Obsidian is a first-party studio. And we're now deep into the console cycle where enough time has passed that developers will have a good grasp of what can and can't be done with the hardware. And if 60 FPS is not only what you said is going to be the standard, but something that gamers want, and every time a game doesn't hit that, there's this huge controversy. And this is not like a new Xbox problem. because they, before Starfield came out, it was confirmed that on console it's going to be 30 FPS, but if you're playing on PC, you can play at 60 FPS. And it's like, okay. And I got the game. It was on Game Pass, right? I've got a PC. I've got an Xbox. I played on Xbox, and you get used to the 30 FPS. It's not ideal, but you deal with it. And I was having fun. But then I jump on PC, and I'm like, oh, this is just so much smoother and so much better.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, they, like Bethesda Game Studios, said the same thing. It was like, we're focused on the fidelity and how the game looks, and we want to ensure a stable 30 FPS experience. And then 6 months later, you go into the options, you tick performance mode, and the visual difference isn't even massive, right? It's like the visual drop off is like, oh, okay, it doesn't look noticeably worse. And now it's just so much
the trade off is easily worth it.
Yeah,
it's easily worth it. Why do you think they developers choose to do this? And I believe it is to make their game more easily marketable.
Yes. But there's, to play devil's advocate, right? The developer in the interview also said that they're not thinking about performance right now, which is kind of strange because the game was supposed to be out in a couple of months, but now it's been pushed back to February. And performance optimization is one of the very last things that developers do, right? Okay. So like the final performance pass to try and to make sure that every part of the game is hitting a certain target. So that happens at the very end. So they kind of indicated that with Avowed that hasn't happened yet. So there is a chance that they could be adding a performance mode to the game for Xbox. And by the sounds of the feedback and the backlash at the moment, I think that they should, and that these extra couple of months should be spent pushing for performance mode. Like another game was Redfall, which was a flop, right? Arcane Studios, it was like a vampire hunting game. It was
didn't that get folded? Good. Didn't the developer get...
Yeah, Arcane Austin was dissolved because, for whatever reasons, but this game was a flop. And when it launched, it was 30 FPS. It was the same situation. But that game had performance issues outside of the frame rate, right? It was like glitchy. The game just felt unfinished. It was kind of like systems were kind of like, like just half-baked, right? Yeah. It was kind of like a half-baked game anyway. But, the final patch for that game, however many months later, added a performance mode. It's like, what are you doing? So then, like with Avowed, then people are rightfully, being snarky to say like, okay, because, Xbox games are now coming on PS5. This hasn't been announced for PlayStation 5. And they'll go, well, by the time it comes to PS5, we'll get to play this at 60 FPS. Enjoy your 30 FPS version, Xbox gamers. Which is kind of like a snarky console war thing, which is like, whatever. Like, who cares about like Xbox versus PlayStation? Like, why would you take it that personally? You know what I mean?
But I think it's more of a dig at Xbox rather than the owners of Xbox gamers.
Yes, but it's like rubbing it in their face sort of thing.
Essentially, yes, it is. Isn't Microsoft marketing the Xbox as like the world's most powerful console?
Yeah, there's that thing as well. The world's most powerful console. And so then that's the snarky thing as well. It's like, the world's most powerful console, 30 FPS. Have fun, boys. I'll play on PC at 60, or I'll play with a GeForce with DLSS and FrameGen and hit 100 plus FPS.
All the Obsidian needs to do here is release the game with the option. It's like what I said at the end of my article. I said gamers want to play games, not tech demos, or at the very least be given the option to choose. That's it. That's it. Like some people will, I'm sure. Even though you are right in saying that people are more likely to turn on performance mode than leave it on quality when it comes to their RPG games. I'm sure there is a small percentage of people, maybe a bigger percentage than what we think, that do leave it on quality. Maybe they... I reckon there is. I reckon there probably is. I reckon there's probably millions of gamers out there that don't mind 30 FPS. And I mean, I'm sure there is... You wouldn't struggle to find comments that being like, oh, who cares about 30 FPS? Like, the game looks sick. Like, I'm sure that there is people out there. But the problem is, at least with Avowed, is there isn't an option. There is no option at the moment.
And also as well, like as you highlighted in your article is that AMD's FSR3 is available on Xbox.
Yeah.
FSR 3.1, whatever it is available for Xbox developers, and it is a upscaling tool like DLSS. So when you upscale to 4K, it actually looks pretty good. Yeah. And so that's a way that they can boost performance, right? They could get that 30 to 50, like probably quite easily. And on top of that, frame generation is available on consoles. There is a game Avowed that uses it, and it runs pretty well on console.
Yeah.
So
we're not even asking for real frames.
Yeah,
but like even the fake ones. Even the fake ones. Yeah.
And Sony's first-party developers have added modes to games like Spider-Man and things like that, where it's a in-between mode for those with HDMI 2.1 TVs like OLED TVs or high-end Samsung TVs that have variable refresh rate. So what they do is they have a 40 FPS mode. And a 40 FPS mode is really smooth on console and TV because the TVs are maxed out at most of them at 120, 4K 120, right? And 40 is divisible by 3. So the refresh rate is almost like 40 FPS is kind of like tailor-made for those sort of TVs.
Which is beautiful.
And you wouldn't think that that's the case, but 40 FPS compared to 30 FPS is a pretty big jump in how smooth the game feels.
Well, and what's that in percentage-wise? That would be
like an extra 30% almost.
Yeah, the more frame data available on the screen at any given moment.
Yeah, it might not sound like a lot, but it actually is.
Yeah.
So they could even do like a 40 FPS mode, which would be great.
That would be... Yeah, see, there's so many... That's what I said in the story. I'm getting heated. with all of the aforementioned reasons why increasing FPS above 30 is warranted in almost every case, I don't believe there is any reason why a developer/publisher should release a AAA title with a 30 FPS cap without any additional options, especially if the reason for the 30 FPS cap is to make the graphics of the game better so it's more easily marketable. I really do believe that is the case with I think the games are pushed graphically first, and if your pipeline is correct, like the performance is the last thing to be like fine-tuned. I think they try and hit the graphics as hard as possible, and I think that's publisher pressure as well. Like I would like to believe, and maybe it could be a naive take, that developers would want their game to be running as smooth as possible before it looks good, because they're also gamers, and I believe that should be I believe that take as performance over graphics is the most, like, if you ask the average gamer, they would say yes, right?
Yeah.
Don't you think that?
I think so too. And the thing is with like Avowed, right? Like, even though it's a RPG, and a lot of the game you'll be just looking at characters and talking to them, talking to your companions, or going to a town or whatever the case is in your inventory, and you're like, okay, like 30 FPS, whatever, right? You're just speaking to a character. But if you look at the combat, it's very, there's a lot of like spells and like magic. So there's a lot of like pyrotechnics and things happening, and you're going to be
motion
spinning your camera and stuff like that. So it seems that even just from a combat perspective, the 60 FPS would be a game changer for how you perceive.
Definitely.
How you're immersed in that world, or how you perceive, like how the world and all that sort of stuff. Like, you'll just feel more connected and less like janky.
You'll be able to appreciate the graphic work that they've put into it.
Yeah, just cut it down. Like, I don't mind like lower settings. Who cares? Like, lower the draw distance a bit. Yeah.
We have so many stories to get
Keep
through.
Keep it on the Xbox wagon, because I know you've been playing an Xbox game that...
Oh, yes.
We've been hanging for. I've actually played the tutorial as well, so I saw your video, right? And we're talking about Age of Empires, Age of Mythology Retold. And as soon as I heard like the Greek, the workers, prostima. I'm like, oh, okay, that brings back memories.
We are back in. Yes, I have been enjoying Age of Mythology Retold. The game isn't even out yet as of recording this. It drops on September 9, but the embargo has released. So the There is plenty of content online that you can go and check it out, but just a little backstory. Age of Mythology and Age of Empires were two of the games that my dad showed me how to play. It was some of the first video games I ever played, ever, and it blew me away just being such a medieval fan. As a kid, I remember reading like all of these. I used to go to the library, and I'm talking like below 10, and borrow medieval books and look through like catapults and old swords, and then like trace them back to I don't know. It always just interests me. And then I saw this game where you were like playing God. And you chose a civilization, and then you build a civilization of medieval truths. I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. And then I saw the game where it was mythical creatures. And I'm oh, this is like all of the Percy Jackson stories that I was reading, because I read all of the Percy Jackson books as a kid. That was one of the first book series that I ever read. And that's all Greek mythology, the pantheon, all of the gods, even though it's like a kid's version of the story. But then I eventually picked up like the Iliad and like actually read Homer's the Iliad and the Odyssey.
That's awesome. Yeah. Because for me, it was Clash of the Titans and Jason and the Argonauts, those like old movies that my dad watched as a kid, and then they were playing on TV when I was young. And it was like that Ray Harryhausen special effects that was like stop motion creatures. So like in Jason and the Argonauts, you see like some like the gods and things like that, and like mythical like creatures that are like all stop motion. There's that classic scene where he's finding the skeletons and it's all like stop motion. And so it's like that love of Greek mythology, like I think a lot of kids have, and seeing it in Age of Empires, like a mythical version of it, was so cool. Yeah,
it blew my socks off. But so Age of Mythology Retold drops on, I'm pretty sure it's September 9th. It's going to be $30 on Steam. It's also coming to Xbox as well.
Game Pass.
What was that, sorry?
And it's also on Game Pass.
Yes, it is on Game Pass. It is developed by World's Edge and Forgotten Empires, which also have done I think they did Age of Empires 4. Yeah, Age of Empires 4.
And the Age of Empires 2 remaster and stuff like that. Yeah.
They're treating both of these franchises extremely well. The community is, they never stop playing these games. These are classic RTSs, but now they're being reinvigorated with a fresh coat of paint.
In Age of Mythology remakes.
Yeah, it is. It is unbelievable how much... when I jumped into the game and then you hear like that like intro music, I shed obviously one single tear. I'm a single tear kind of guy. Jumped into a skirmish and just exploring the new quality of life features. They really have put in modern RTS features into the old game, but have still managed to capture the essence of Age of Mythology. Like, it still feels like old Age of Mythology, but it just feels almost brought to like 2020, 2024. You know what I mean?
It's like because they did it with the older ones that they've remastered as well, where they've added these kind of like production shortcuts, so you can like just select all, like you can just set what your workers to do. You can kind of like just automatically divide them to say like do 60% gold, 40% wood, 20% this, or there's like different like versions. So based on what you need at that time or what you're building towards, just to streamline it so you don't have to micromanage as much, like each individual worker. Okay, 6 of you go here, 3 of you go there, 2 of you go there, 1 of you does this. So, and then you can just streamline and access all that sort of stuff a lot quicker, which is really cool.
Well, it's almost like it's an automatic economy. So you can kind of, I don't use it because I suppose I'm such an old school player.
It works really well on console.
But I can't imagine, that's what I was thinking when I was looking at it. I'm like, this is perfect for console, because I can't imagine how, like, what I'm going to use like the joystick to go over and then hold A and then drag back, and then hopefully I drag like a perfect square. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine playing Age of Mythology or any kind of RTS with a controller.
I've tried so many times because I love RTS, right? So like I grew up with Command and Conquer and StarCraft.
Oh
and
yeah.
Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3. And so like
it's so good.
and so like when like Command and Conquer came to like Xbox 360, I started playing that, and Halo Wars as well was like a Xbox's console RTS, and they kind of work, but like like this genre is just so much better with a keyboard and mouse because that's what it's like a point and click sort of game. But yeah, like it works with controller, and this is worth like picking up on console if you don't have like a gaming PC. But were you surprised to see like I mean the visual upgrade is great, but it's faithful to the original because it still looks like the art direction hasn't changed. It's just the fidelity has been increased. Were you surprised to see ray tracing as an option in the game?
Yes.
I was like, what? This game's got ray tracing?
It also has FSR as well, but I didn't turn it on because I wanted
I didn't turn it on.
Yeah, I don't want to turn it on.
I was surprised, like, no DLSS is a bit of a shock.
Do it, dude. No, yes, you're right. And it's called Mythical, which I think is awesome. The RTX features is
like mythic,
mythic level, which is really cool. The benchmark,
it has a really cool benchmark.
It's really sick. It's really cool.
It's just like a single frame of like a forest with like all, and it just like the benchmark just keeps like spawning in more and more units, and they just just fight with just all their things going off.
Yeah,
and then you just like it just throws as many units and abilities and spells and all that sort of stuff on screen, and it just ramps up. And it's a really good benchmark because it's a stress test to show you that like if you're in the midst of like a heated multiplayer or skirmish with AI,
imagine if that was going on between players. Imagine if the bench, that would be the craziest fight of all time. There is an ungodly amount of units on the thing. It's insane.
Yeah. That's worth a follow-up article. You should just capture the benchmark and just post it like, Age of Empires, like insane benchmark. Like,
yeah, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll do that today. That's actually a good idea. And I'll get the footage, and Reese can remind me to send you the footage for that benchmark because it's a very cool benchmark. Speaking on the benchmark, the game is locked. Multiplayer is locked unless you hit a certain performance level. Did you see that? In the benchmark?
But like I saw it say that like you have to hit like
1,000.
Like a certain score, because it doesn't give you like FPS. It gives you a score, and like you need a score to play. So honestly, like I thought it was just a suggestion. Like it was like don't play unless you have this score, but it's like it actually locks it out unless you have that score.
I'm pretty sure. I will have to double check, but I did. When I benchmarked it, I hit 1600 with the
the
build,
4090.
But with the 4090 pretty much is pulling like 90% of the cart here. But it said that you need to hit at least 1,000 on the inbuilt benchmark tool to access multiplayer. So what I took from that was you need to balance your settings. Like you can choose whatever settings you want and play offline, but they don't want you to jump into a multiplayer game but then it's like the frame rate, it's client sided. It's not like you're lagging the server. You know what I mean? It's not like you're lagging the game. I think
it's just to ensure that you have a good experience.
Why would they do that? Why?
Like, I don't know if it's locked, to be honest. We'll probably have to double check that. But like, I think it's a good thing because like Age of Empires, like the campaign is one thing, right? Like play it however you want. But like the skirmish, and that's where the game, like people are playing for decades and like, custom maps and things like that. So it probably makes sense. But the game is well optimized too, right? So like if with ray tracing and stuff disabled, and you're just using like the high settings or the default settings, and it looks great. It runs really, really fast. So it just has like those warnings in there to say like if you're going to push the visuals, like you're going to like make sure you've got this score in the benchmark.
Yeah, because look, if you went on to multiplayer and then you did, what is it, 8v8? What's the biggest? What's the biggest one?
I'm not too sure.
It's got to be at least be 8, I think. But anyway, you just did the max amount of players on the largest map. Like you could get something similar to what the benchmark was, and that pretty much gave the computer a nosebleed. Like that was a lot going on screen. I I was set up in the lounge room on the 65-inch LG OLED that I recently purchased. That I should probably talk about that on the podcast at some stage. I want to do an article on it because it's just so gorgeous. But I was set up on that without a second monitor, so I wasn't able to actually pull up Task Manager to see what it was doing. But looking at that benchmark, I reckon the CPU would have been 100% load. There is so many units on screen, so many numbers being calculated. Yes, the graphics look insane, and it's like mind-blowing. It feels like Neo when he's getting like the thing put into the back of his head for the first time. He's like, there's just so much happening on screen. But I reckon it's the CPU heavy as well, don't you think?
Yeah, like it would be, but like I don't know how much. It really depends like on how many cores and stuff they use. But it's probably pushing at least a single core pretty hard, I reckon. But yeah, that was just a little update from what I'm playing at the moment. What are you jumping into? Are you enjoying Star Wars? I'm playing Star Wars Outlaws. So Ubisoft sent me a code.
Nice.
And the game looks pretty incredible, fully maxed out on PC. So it has like a full ray tracing mode with DLSS 3.5 ray reconstruction, which basically makes the reflections and everything just look super crisp and detailed, especially for ray tracing effects. It's like a game changer. And when you first see Stormtroopers, it kind of looks like NVIDIA did like an Unreal Engine demo with ILM for ray tracing years ago, where it shows like troopers coming out of an elevator, and you just see like the shiny armor and the reflection, and it just looks real. Like it just looks so cool. When you come to Stormtroopers in the game, it looks just like that. It's like, wow, that looks incredible. Some of the visuals in the game, the outer environments look great, but the game is so far not incredible. It's weird, right? So like the game is developed by Massive, which developed the Division series of games and the Avatar game. So this is like a third-person game with a lot of stealth, like really basic stealth where you're kind of like, oh, look, there's tall grass to creep around in. Of course, in this courtyard, there's tall grass just sitting there. You know what I mean? Like there's no real reason for there to be tall grass in this immaculate courtyard, right? Like surely they're going to be like keeping the grass nice and trim. But it's kind of like that old school Assassin's Creed thing. And then there is like not really parkour, but like an Uncharted where like you just see like, oh, that's the ledge where you can shimmy across, and then you can jump to the next ledge and then climb up, and then you're running across the rooftops, and then you're jumping to another rooftop, and then there is like cover-based shooting, which is actually a lot of fun. But all that sort of like stealth and jump Uncharted stuff is really kind of like feels like 10, 15 years old. It's a little bit clunky, and it's weird because it makes me think, why didn't they use the Assassin's Creed engine instead? Because it kind of like feels more like an Assassin's Creed game than Division. Like the shooting is fine and it works great. It's kind of like an arcade style shooter. It's just like the blaster shots. It's just like a fun, really basic sort of game.
Over the shoulder. Yeah,
it's just like, Star Wars. It's fun.
Is all of these like the parts where you climb the terrain, etc.? Is it all very telegraphed?
Yeah,
is that what you mean? You're like, oh, that's obviously where you would crouch. That's obviously where you would. Like, it doesn't feel like these mechanics are baked into the world as seamlessly as they should be.
It's not seamless. Like you go, okay, now I'm Uncharted climbing, and now I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Like the transition is not fluid. And why I'm saying like, why isn't it using the Assassin's Creed engine? Because Assassin's Creed has gotten to the point where you run up a wall, you climb on the roof, you jump to this and that.
But you can go anywhere, really, can't you?
The animation transitions are all pretty fluid, and you just feel like you're moving through the world. There's stealth, etc., etc. Whereas this has those elements, but it's just like every movement feels like you're watching like an animation play out. Where it's like, okay, press button to climb. Okay, now I'm climbing, and it's like I'm on a ledge. Jump there, and it's just not. It just doesn't look.
It's not great. Fluid. It's not. It's janky.
Yeah, and the real time cutscenes, like the characters, just feel like almost like from a Bethesda game from 10 years ago, where they're just standing there going, rah, 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 rah. and it's like
I
the lip
love the
syncing is,
talking heads. The talking head is so funny. The zoom in still makes me laugh. It's just like, why do we need to get that close? You know what I mean? Like, just
like
bring
in
the camera. But
is one of
it's
the worst
like
examples.
it's like in my eye, it's like it's just your head. I don't know why they have to go all the way in like that. Like, pull the camera back, bro. What's the performance like? What's the performance?
Like you need a high-end PC to run it on like the full settings. So it's basically almost like Black Myth Wukong, where you're getting like 70 to 100 with like fully maxed out with DLSS and frame gen. It is like the amount of visual things that are going on are really impressive. There's a lot of like outdoor stuff that just looks stunning. It's like some of it looks like some of the best Star Wars stuff you've seen. And as a Star Wars fan of mainly games these days, like kind of like bounced off all the shows and movies and stuff. But it is like, it's cool if you're a Star Wars fan. Like, it's worth playing it, but it feels like the most 7 out of 10 game that's ever been made. If you know what I mean? It's like it's good. There are moments of greatness, but it's kind of like it's never beyond being just good. You know what I mean? Like,
what was the last good Star Wars one? Is it that Jedi?
So Jedi Survivor, I think, is a better game, especially like the action and the combat and the movement, like, and that's more of like a God of War, Uncharted style. Like, you know, there is like a lot of jumping and climbing and things like that. That stuff just feels like so much better in Jedi Survivor. Like, if you were to put those games side by side and you play Jedi Survivor for like 30 minutes and be like, okay, yeah, this feels great.
Yeah, because the combat looks unbelievable in that. Where you're like cutting through stormtroopers and stuff like that. Great. Yeah, and I've seen some videos of people that are quite good at it, and I'm like, damn, that looks fun. Also, that game, didn't that have performance issues at launch?
Yeah, that was like a game that was like kind of. But
then it got fixed later, right?
Yeah, it's been fixed now. It's so much better now. Yeah. This will probably have a few patches. It's a little bit glitchy. The performance could probably be improved. But like, I think it's just a fine game. Like, it's not going to set the world on fire. But I think if you're a Star Wars fan, it's worth checking out. Like, if it looks interesting to you, like, I wouldn't go and say like, oh, this is a must play. But I think it's just like a fun.
Maybe just wait till it's on sale or something. Get it on discount. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to a game that is setting the world on fire, but perhaps not. Maybe fire isn't the right way to put it. Maybe it's like farts. Like, maybe it's making the world stinky.
Yeah, it's like a
it's a boo boo.
A fizzle.
They've got a boo boo.
Yeah. So we're talking about Concord. Concord, the new game from Sony, and PlayStation
Sony's
Studios.
Got a boo-boo. Concord's their boo-boo. We got to get
Firewalk Studios. Yep.
Yeah, we got to give him a Dora the Explorer Band-Aid.
All right, so
go on. You go ahead.
Yeah, so Concord was kind of like showcased earlier this year. They released I think a trailer last year, maybe. So it's from Firewalk Studios. It's a new first-party Sony studio. They acquired them basically for this game. And it's apparently been in development for like almost 8 years, right? It launched simultaneously on PC and PlayStation 5. It is a multiplayer game. Now, Sony had huge success with Helldivers 2 earlier this year. So perhaps this was like another case of, okay, we're going to do like another massive live service multiplayer shooter. And so, but the thing is that like ever since it was announced and showcased, people were kind of like, oh, it looks like a Guardians of the Galaxy knockoff. The sci-fi world looks kind of okay, but the characters are like, bland. And it's a hero shooter, right? So it's kind of like, oh, this is just another Overwatch style game. We don't need another one of those. That's not what people are hungry for. And so they had a few betas as well, and the betas were made headlines because they didn't, the Steam data showed that like there isn't much interest at all for this game, right? So there was like an open beta that peaked at like 2,500 players. That means anybody on PC could jump into the open beta and play it on Steam. like a new multiplayer game, a major AAA multiplayer game from PlayStation, playable this weekend, jump in and have fun, right? And it barely made an impact. And so then the game came out, and it's insane because it is probably one of the biggest flops in video game history.
Tell them how much it cost.
It's $40 US.
No, how much it cost to make the game?
150 million or something like that.
Yeah, go on.
And so yeah, so like it's not free to play.
Now tell them how many people are playing it.
So the game launched, and on its second day of launch, which is like a weekend, it peaked at under 700 players on Steam, concurrent, and then it's dropped off. Let me bring it up now on SteamDB to see how many people are playing Concord.
Oh, right now, dude, the gameplay for this looks slow. It looks slow.
Well, like apparently people saying that the actual gameplay is not that bad. But like, I mean, outside of that, right? So there's only 142 people playing the game on Steam, which means that for a multiplayer game, you're going to be sitting in a queue trying to matchmake for ages. You're not going to be able to get in a game, really.
Yeah, it hasn't hit critical mass.
Yeah, it's now hit a point where like either it's going to be shut down or who knows what's going to happen. But you know, why has it like just failed completely? I think one of the reasons is that as a hero shooter, there's like two main reasons. Charging $40 for this game when Overwatch 2, Valorant, Apex Legends, Counter-Strike 2, and Marvel Rivals, which is a new Overwatch style shooter with Marvel characters, they're all those games are free to play. So Concord is like, well, no, we're not free to play, even though the whole industry for this type of game has switched to that. We're going to charge you $40 and there's not going to be any microtransactions or whatever the case is. And it's just going to be seasonal content, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, okay. So that's already like a thing that's like a hurdle that the game is going to have to overcome to be like, oh, we have to pay to play it, to try it out. And the second reason is that it just looks bland. All the heroes kind of just like blend into each other. They're not interesting looking characters. The abilities and stuff like that, the archetypes don't look defined. Now, if you look at Overwatch 2, like go back to, or even the original Overwatch when that launched, you look at Roadhog, you go, okay, that silhouette of Roadhog you could spot from a mile away. The shotgun blast, the chain to pull characters in, the way he moves and the abilities, it's like, okay, I know Roadhog. Junkrat, if I just hear Junkrat.
Yeah, they're very distinct.
Distance, I know Junkrat. That's Mercy. We don't make it. Like, I can Genji, etc., etc. All the characters almost feel iconic because they're really these defined characters and archetypes, and the art style is very deliberate and very Blizzard.
And it's baked into the premise of the game where this is the team of Overwatch, kind of like the Avengers of that universe where, the Avengers is another perfect example is that all of the characters feel very different. There isn't, I mean, you could argue like maybe even Black Widow and like Hawkeye feel very different and they're both like agents. So in this game, you're saying that they're not very distinct. There isn't like intrinsic differences or enough intrinsic differences between the characters for them to feel unique.
Yeah, and that's right. Yeah. But also it's like the designs. It's like you can't, like if you saw, like it's a part of like the perception. Like if you see like 5-6 characters around. Like
they literally look the same.
Well, they don't look the same. They just look like the figures are just like, okay, like which character is that? What are they like? Oh, okay. And they're just not interesting looking characters to begin with.
Right.
But the fidelity is like super high, right? So it's not that the game looks photorealistic, but like the character designs are going for that sort of like level of detail that seems to be a little bit too high for this type of game. You need to be more, like you would probably want to be more stylized like Overwatch.
More arcadey.
Yeah. And the thing is like, that was the feedback that people had when they first saw gameplay of it. It was like, oh, I don't like the look of this. And maybe like a lot of people just said, I don't like the look of it, right? They didn't articulate why. But then because the game has flopped so hard, you have to look to say like, okay, why? And most people, even critics, are saying that, even reviews that are positive on the gameplay, like the shooting mechanics and stuff like that. Like there's people that worked on Destiny worked on it, like Bungie or whatever the case is. So, like the movement of the first person shooting, like the aiming is like, okay, yeah, aim down sights, all that stuff is pretty solid. And like it has like an interesting thing that it does where if you switch a character midway through a round, like you take some of the attributes from your previous character that you used to buff your next character. So like there's that sort of mechanic, which sounds kind of cool. It's like, like you switch characters to become more powerful and you can kind of like create like different variations as you play.
If you've won or if you've died?
Oh, no, just if you've died, whatever, you just switch characters, I think, at a certain
automatically.
Point. And then you get... No, like if you change your hero like you do in Overwatch, you can get like a buff like based on your previous character. So it's kind of like a cool thing. But like I think it just comes down to like the characters in the world being kind of meh. And they did this weird thing where it's like every week you're going to get like a new high quality cinematic to watch with the characters hanging out talking. It's like, who wants that? Because nobody cares about the characters. And those cinematics are just like super high detail that probably a lot of the money went into, and they're just like not poorly, just like uninteresting or just a bland. The writing's not anything special. You don't really care about these characters. You're not super interested in the world. So
is it telling a story? Is the cinematics like...
Yeah. I think they are like to just like to keep telling like a story as it goes.
Right.
That was the plan.
How many players on PlayStation?
That's what we don't know. But
40,000 I saw was an estimate.
Yeah, that's for like total sales or something like that.
Total. Yeah, I was just trying to get an approximate number on how many units have been sold in total.
Like if you look at like the PlayStation store like sales and stuff, it's like way down the list.
Yeah.
On Steam, hasn't made a blip. So like put into perspective, like massive flops in recent years. At the start of this year, there was that Suicide Squad game from Rocksteady, who developed the Batman Arkham games, and it's like, one of the great developers. They haven't made a game for like 8-9 years.
Yeah.
And then they released this third-person looter shooter Suicide Squad game that tanked.
Yeah,
But that at launch had, like 10, 20 times as many players as Concord. And that was a full-priced game. That was more expensive than this. And that was a flop. The Golem game, remember how bad that was?
Oh, don't even, nah.
That had more players. That was a flop that sold basically nothing. It didn't have many more players than Concord, but it beat Concord, right? So this is, and that wasn't a AAA Sony PlayStation release,
oh no, but it was priced like one. It was, it was priced as one.
So,
oh man, I'm seeing stars from you. You reminded me of that Golem game, that gross little Golem. Ugh.
Yeah. So I just think that this game, like, even if they pivot to make it free to play, which isn't an easy thing, right? Because to make it free to play, you have to change a lot about the game. And like at this point, Sony might be like, well, if we go free to play, we're going to have to change how the game...
What's their other option?
How the game works,
Get
right?
another 40 people to buy it for $40. It's only made like less than $2 million.
I think they just bury it. I think this is like a write-off.
This is dead.
This is dead.
Look, there is... social platforms. Marcus Brownlee did a fantastic video on, it was the Waveform podcast, his podcast. They were talking about social platforms like Facebook, Instagram. It's a slight tangent, but wait for me to tie it back around. Social platforms need to reach a certain amount of users for them to function and survive. But strangely enough, when a new social platform comes out, everyone hops over for a short amount of time. And then the user base goes all the way up. And then people start to realize, they don't have this feature. They don't have that feature from all of the ones that are all well established. They need to reach a critical mass before they can even function past launch. Games are the exact same, especially for a game like this where you need other players to be able to enjoy it. So like you said, there's like 700 players on Steam, or at the moment there was like 146 or something like that. It's like
even if you bought the game now,
you can't even play it anymore.
Like even if you're like, okay, I'm going to give it a try, I'm going to buy it, right? And you're going to have to buy it to play it. if you do that, then there's no guarantee you're going to even be able to get into a game. Like if you're in Australia and like the peak time is like when US players are playing at night, or in the evening, and that's like a weird time for Australia. Like that's like during the business hours, whatever the case is. Like how many Australians are going to be playing the game? Like a lot of these sort of games are regional based as well. They have spikes and dips based on like time zones and things like that. But also as well, like one of the other reasons this has failed is because of this push for players to play the same game and only that game, right? So you've got Counter-Strike, you've got Call of Duty, Valorant, Apex, Fortnite, PUBG is still a thing. Like there's so many of these games that have just existed for years and years. And there was a recent study that showed that most games being played today, if you look at the wider landscape, are at least 5 years old. And that's because developers and publishers have seen that like, okay, if we push this game and we start doing the battle pass thing, which is now kind of standard, you do microtransactions, you do seasonal content drops, you keep your players engaged. Like, if
That's
Sony
the
has a few of
blueprint.
these games like Helldivers and Destiny and things like that. And what you do is then like, okay, you've got your audience and you've got your players and you got to try keeping them engaged and you want to keep them playing for years. And then, but the byproduct of that is that, or if you're introducing a new style of game that is that, it's going to be even more difficult now. If that's where the money is, like now it's going to be even harder to break in because you've created this whole ecosystem of why would I jump to Concord if I'm playing Valorant, Counter-Strike, and Overwatch 2? If I have these
you
three
might
games
already
that I
be
play,
good at it as well.
yeah. If I already have 4 live service shooters that I jump between and they're all free to play, why would I jump into Concord?
Yeah,
And especially if it looks bland. And that could be one of the, but the magnitude of its failure is the surprising thing.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because this
absolutely.
is a PlayStation game, right? This is like, this is the same PlayStation Studios that drops God of War and Ghost of Tsushima and Spider-Man, all these like major games, Last of Us. This isn't like, a known franchise like that, but this is a PlayStation Studios game that has $100 million behind it.
Yeah, and when was the last first-party PlayStation game that came out? That was like...
Yeah, they're in a bit of a drought. Which is we don't actually even know what there's no like Last of Us Part 3 or Uncharted or God of War 3 that we know of to look forward to, which is strange.
I just to round off this story here, I think Sony is going to be forced to make this free to play, because they don't have another option. They can't. I don't think they're just going to let $150 million slide into like yes, it is a tax write-off. But I think they just turn it on free to play. Obviously, it's going to take a bit of work, but if they switch it to free to play, spend a little bit more money, and then still it's not even picked up, then they can just, write it off anyway. Because they've made less than $2 million estimated, and it's $150 million investment.
Yeah, it's
Jesus Christ. They need to get something from this. Like anything is better than what they're getting. So I reckon we will eventually see that game go. Do you know what they were at? Oh, it's actually going to cost them way more money. I don't know if I just realized if they make it free to play, they're probably going to have to refund everyone that bought it.
Yes, they're going to have to do something. Like maybe
so they have to give. It's going to cost them $2 million.
Or they're going to have to develop like this, a set of like a founder's armor for every character, like Overwatch did. It's like you get if you upgrade to Overwatch 2, you get all these skins and all this stuff. Like you have to do something to accommodate for people that have spent money for it.
Yeah,
and I don't think it'll be refunds. It'll be like they're going to have to spend money to develop content for them specifically. And it's probably, and it has to be cosmetic stuff. And that doesn't come cheap, especially when the level of detail on these characters, as bland as they are, is super high. Like if you look at like the character intros, they look like really like CG quality. It's like, wow. But at the end of the day, like they're still bland. Like great that it looks technically advanced, and that would have taken animators like months to perfect or whatever the case is. That's where the money went in.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll keep our eyes on this and let you guys know if it does go free to play or if there's some kind of update. But I mean, at this rate, we probably would just forget about it to be honest, just like everyone else has. But speaking on the Sony drought, that might be coming to an end very soon. We have a new leak on the quote unquote the final design of the PS5 Pro. This comes from a supposedly a reliable leaker. I haven't personally been keeping up with his past predictions, but according to other outlets, this guy's pretty good.
Yep. He accurately predicted a few things.
Yeah, he's accurately predicted some games coming to PS Plus, so that's indicated that he has an insider source somewhere in Sony. But the new leak is a sketch of the final PS5 Pro design, and it's actually quite reminiscent of the PS4 Pro, don't you reckon?
Yeah, they've done that thing where they added like kind of like a stripe or like sort of like pattern. So it looks like the existing PS5 Pro
Slim. Sorry, not
Slim.
the PS4 Pro, the PS5 Slim. My bad.
Yeah, it looks like the Slim. And based on that leak, it's going to be a digital only console, which is interesting. But like it kind of like makes sense. Like when the PS5 launched, right, and the Xbox Series X, and Xbox said the Series S is a digital only console, people were like, ooh, because at that point people were still buying disc games and things like that. But like I've got an Xbox Series X and with Game Pass and stuff like that, and it's like I can't remember the last time I've used the drive in it, and I probably only used it to play movies, right? And it's probably the same with the PS5. Most people are just digital only now, so it makes sense. Like the downside is that you can't use it to play Blu-rays anymore, which is like it's
a pretty big downside for me.
Yeah, it's a big downside, but the fact that it's going digital, I think, will save on cost. But
yeah.
The PS5 Pro is weird because there was another story that broke recently is that that Sony announced that they're increasing the price of the PlayStation 5 in Japan.
Oh.
Like it's like the third price increase, and the price increase equates to $90 US. So it's almost like a 20% price increase.
So wait, hold on. PS5
the normal
MSRP
PlayStation 5
is $499?
Oh, in the US, yeah.
In the US, yeah.
They haven't increased in the US, but every other market in Australia, the price has increased since launch. So we might be getting another price increase as well. So it's weird that they're citing global economic this and that, and you know, at like 4 years later, you would expect these consoles
COVID
to be cheaper. Yeah, but they're not. And so with that, like, how much is this PS5 Pro going to cost?
Yeah, well, we also had that other leak, that story that Anthony did about the storage. Like the PS5 Pro could start at 2 terabytes, and that would kind of make sense. With was that the story, starting at 2 terabytes?
That's a different story, yeah. But that's like the dev kit apparently has 2 terabytes. Like the 2 terabyte thing.
That seems crazy, but if also it's a digital only console, it would make sense for an increase in storage on the stock.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Upgrading the storage on your existing PlayStation 5 is now really, really easy and super affordable because it's a Gen 4 high-speed drive, and those have come down in cost dramatically. Like that's the one thing that has come down in cost dramatically since the PS5 launch.
SSDs are cheap.
You can add 4 terabytes to your PS5 pretty easily, and sure, it's going to be more than, but like, you know, an additional 1 terabyte of storage is really cheap now. 2 terabytes is super. That's kind of like the sweet spot now to add 2 terabytes to it. So I would prefer the PS5 Pro to launch with a terabyte internal drive, and then just whack a 2 terabyte drive in there that are, you know, from my existing PS5, or just get one that's affordable and on sale, and whack that in there, as opposed, because adding storage to these devices costs so much money. Like, look at phones. A 512 phone versus a terabyte phone. How much more expensive is flash memory in that?
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
It's like $200.
A laptop with a 512 or a 1 terabyte, or a laptop with a 2 terabyte drive. How much extra is that? Huge, right? Like, there's no world where like just adding an additional terabyte of storage is not going to add $100 minimum to the price. It's just not going to happen. Like,
especially when you can just like say in the instances of phones, what I'm telling people now is, and it's the reason why I got the iPhone 15 Pro Max, is USB-C. You can now shoot directly straight to, you can do this on Android and iOS, straight to an SSD. I don't even need I don't even need a record to the storage on my device. I can just plug an external SSD in and just go 4K 60 straight to the SSD.
And you would do that instead of like opting for like
a bigger phone.
A phone with like, you know, 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes that's cost twice the price just because of storage.
Yeah.
Like,
there's just a side note. There's a company, .case. I've showed you their adapters. They make really cool, like really nerdy adapters that you can see into, and you can see all of the, I think I showed you at Computex, that big like thing. They have they're sending me a MagSafe SSD enclosure with a tiny USB-C cable, so it goes like click onto the back, and it's got a tiny M.2 inside of it, and then the USB-C cable goes directly into my phone, and it's for shooting 4K 60 directly to the SSD. And I'm like, and you can also do that on Android, and that's the same thing for your games. It's better than paying. It's better right now to buy external storage, new storage, like versus upgrading the internal of the device.
That's one of the reasons why Xbox is kind of like, because they've got that proprietary storage that you have to buy their specific ones that cost twice as much as
like Seagate.
Yeah, it costs twice as much as like a standard SSD, and it's the same thing. And there's so many SSDs and great ones too, like, you know, the Patriot Viper stuff that we've reviewed, and I've got one of those in my PS5, like a 4 terabyte, and that's like awesome. It's like 4 terabytes of storage, and that's an affordable SSD. And like and let's say the PS5 had 4 terabytes of internal storage, it would cost an insane amount of money.
$1,500.
Yeah. Insane.
It'd be like $1,200. Yeah, it'd be over $1,000 easily. But for the PS5 Pro design, so the leak says this sketch is the final design of the console. It is confirmed that, well, quote unquote confirmed, it is called the PlayStation 5 Pro. No surprises there. Same DualSense controller. And apparently it's going to be announced in the first half of 2024. Sorry, the first half of September. So next month. I don't know about that. What do you think about that? Do you think the announcement's going to come before the Tokyo Game Show?
It's been like Sony has kind of been weird, right? Like we haven't seen any sort of like major PlayStation 5 game announcements and reveals. So I think maybe they're waiting to, like if it's September and it's coming out this year, like Jeff Grubb has said, that was another story, and he's an insider as well. Now, if it's coming out this year, they're going to have to do some sort of event. And apparently developers since August or have that, you know, like you have to submit games for certification, you know, and then it's like, okay, now you can release it. Like if the game's not going to crash or cause the PlayStation 5 to brick or whatever the case is. That's a lot of certification is just to make sure it runs without
bit of regulation.
Console. Yeah. And apparently that all games that are now being submitted for PlayStation 5 consoles have to also have PS5 Pro certification as well. So then it has to also run on the PS5 Pro spec without the same sort of certification. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to have PS5 Pro features like the rumored, you know, massive ray tracing boost that it's getting thanks to the latest RDNA 4 architecture. It's not that. It's just to say that this console is a real thing and it's probably just around the corner. That's kind of what that says. But
yeah, this is exciting.
I think they're going to show it, and I think they've for sure that they've spent a bunch of time upgrading their existing first-party titles on the console to be PS5 Pro spec. Now that could mean, because apparently they've got their own version of DLSS now called PSSR or whatever it is, and it's like a DLSS AI-based upscaler that's better than FSR. So if they've got that and they've got this ray tracing hardware, you can't launch the console without something, right? And if there's no new major release, there's no like we're not under the impression that Last of Us Part 3 is coming anytime soon. So they're going to have to like launch with like, okay, here's the PS5 Pro, like, you know, update, kind of like what they did for PS4 Pro, for Horizon Forbidden West, for Marvel Spider-Man, for God of War Ragnarok, for like Ghost of Tsushima, maybe like 4 or 5 titles that all run at 4K 60 with ray tracing, the new upscaler, and higher fidelity PC-like graphics.
Yeah, this is something that we talked about months ago. That because we are aware that Sony has nothing in the pipeline. We don't know what's coming first party wise
for the next
from
year.
Sony. So we predicted, I would say probably 10 episodes ago. Huh?
They have Astrobot.
Oh, Astrobot. Oh, yeah. That's right.
But that's a fun game. Like, I'm not going to knock it because the Astrobot game that came with the PlayStation 5 is such a cool game because it's just a fun thing, you know, like you come out of the pure DualSense controller, like it shows you all the new features of the console. It has like a level called ray tracing, blah, blah, blah. And it's just a vibrant game. And the new Astrobot looks really cool. It's like a Mario Odyssey, their version of Mario Odyssey. That's out, I think, next month. But outside of that and the Lego Horizon
system
game,
sellers. There's no like...
there's no
massive Uncharted level games in the works that we know of. So we predicted, I would say 10 episodes ago, probably more, that the PS5 Pro will be released alongside PS5 Pro versions. And we've even had leaks where apparently the games are going to come with stickers. They're going to be like enhanced stickers for these games.
And apparently now they're kind of looking at integrating like an Xbox style feature where it will take existing games and kind of like overdrive them. I think the PS4 Pro did the same thing because the PS4 Pro was like a weird console. It was essentially the PS4 with an extra, not an extra GPU, but basically the GPU was basically just doubled.
Yeah.
Like just doubled the GPU horsepower to be able to run games in 4K. And the way Xbox did it with their One X was similar. But then they've kind of like done a thing where like even if the game is not optimized like a backwards compatible title, we will have an overdrive mode that runs it at 60 FPS or like runs it at 4K native, like if you're backwards compatible and things like that. And so apparently they're going to be doing a similar thing where the PS5 Pro will be able to take maybe PS4 games or PS5 existing titles that haven't been specifically PS5 Pro enhanced with new visuals or whatever the features is, and maybe use their upscaler to push it to make them all like 60 FPS in quality mode or whatever the case is, to be able to run them faster and make them look better.
They have to do something, right? Like
they have to do something, yeah.
Unless they are just sitting on their hands, or maybe they're sandbagging us. Maybe they're holding out. Maybe they're sharking, like they're a pool shark, where they're like, "Oh, I'm not very good at the game." And then like it comes to the Tokyo Game Show, and they're like, "The new God of War, like the new Uncharted," and it's all like, and we're just like, "What the? Where you were cooking? You're cooking all this behind the scenes. You said nothing." And they're like, and the PlayStation 5 Pro is coming out when it'd have to be early next year.
No, I think they're launching it this year. That's the rumor. And
you reckon?
I think it's like a soft launch. I don't like there's no system seller for it. I don't think there's going to be a system seller for it. But I think it's just like they're banking on the hardcore gamers buying one. And there's always going to be an audience that's going to want the most powerful console, right? Because it will be the most powerful console.
Yeah.
But also as well, I think it just lays the groundwork for them to just push the PlayStation as the best looking games for a few months, for like even probably a year, because by the time GTA 6 comes out, the PS5 Pro is going to be the console you want.
Definitely.
Like, yeah. I don't think they delay it until the GTA 6 comes out. I think they just enhance existing games. Maybe there's a surprise first party title or two that are going to look amazing on it, drive the interest that way. And then by the time GTA 6 is fully revealed and a date's announced, they just say, okay, this is the game. They partner with Rockstar. This is what it looks like running on the PS5 Pro, captured on the PS5 Pro. And you look at it and it looks stunning. And then you just go, okay, I need to get me one of these PS5 Pros.
Yeah, I need to get me one. Yeah, well, that's our prediction. So we will see first half of, we're recording this on
September.
the 30th, so next week, in the next couple of weeks, that is when the rumors say Sony is going to unveil the very, very highly anticipated PS5 Pro. But let's move this along to the next story. What do we have here? Let's go
Radeon.
Yeah, let's go Radeon.
Yeah, so this is actually a good thing because like the Radeon 8800 XT, which would be the RDNA 4 next gen card. Now this will have hardware that is going to be in the PS5 Pro, basically. The PS5 Pro apparently is using RDNA 4 architecture for ray tracing. And what we know and new leaks have confirmed is that the PS5 Pros, the RDNA 4s or the 8800 XT's ray tracing will be about 2 to 3 times faster than the existing RDNA 3 cards. So it's going to be a ray tracing thing where it's basically going to be up there with the current 40 series of GeForce cards outside of like the 4080 and the 4090. So like the 4070 Ti Super and things like that, which is impressive for ray tracing.
If that's true, man, the 8800 XT offering the same performance as the 4080 at half the price.
Yeah, so
that's unbelievable.
This is what we've been hearing for a while now, and there's new leaks and that are confirming this, or well, also stating this, is that the performance will be similar to the RTX 4080, which is a high-end 4K card currently, and similar to their current flagship, the 7900 XTX. Where it'll be, which is slightly faster. So it'll kind of like be close enough to that to on paper not be as exciting if it's released for that price, right? If it's like a more efficient, high-end 4K gaming GPU that's similar to what's out there now, like a 4080 or a 7900 XTX, and it's the same price but just more efficient, that's not that exciting. But if it drops for $500, which is what is being considered, but most likely it'll probably go about $600 US. But if it launches for $499 US, what does that do? That puts it in the price bracket of the 4070. And that puts it in that price bracket with better ray tracing performance and RTX 4080 performance, 16 gigs of VRAM, and it's a 4K gaming card, and it potentially could be only like a 200 watt, 220 watt, whatever it is, or maybe even higher, whatever it is. But like it's going to be more efficient and super powerful. And that'll shake up the market in a way. It'll be like, oh, hold on, this is the best value mid-range GPU now. It's like, well, yeah, the 4070 is great. You got DLSS, you got frame gen, you've got all these RTX features for creators, et cetera, but for just bang for your buck gaming, like why wouldn't you go for something that's 30% more powerful?
Well, this would be, I'm just trying to roughly get the frames of this GPU. I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong here, of course, 4K 60 Black Myth Wukong ray tracing max, like everything maxed, because I was getting between like on the 4090, I think I said 70, it was 70 to 90.
Yeah, I don't think
this would mean it would fall around 4K 60 between
technically. The what's like to play, like to take a step back and look at what's happening in like the PC gaming space, like what we saw at Gamescom. Nvidia's going all in on ray tracing, right? Like, Star Wars, Black Myth, Avowed, Indiana Jones, like major games are all going to have ray tracing on PC, but they're also going to have DLSS ray reconstruction, which is like a thing that AMD don't have. So Nvidia has kind of got like the software side, or like the technology side, they're ahead, right? So even if the 8800 XT lives up to all of this, it's going to need something to answer that, because look at Black Myth Wukong, right? Like the FSR and the FSR frame gen doesn't look as good as the DLSS, and it doesn't have the ray reconstruction, which makes the ray tracing look noticeably better, right? So it's going to hit that performance, yes. Like just as you said, it's going to be similar performance, but it's just not going to look as good. Yeah. And that's something that they need to do. So like maybe there's an FSR 4.0. my guess is they're going to have some sort of AI upscaling or some sort of like AI enhanced thing, or they're going to have to sort out, not just ray tracing performance, but to hit that sort of ray reconstruction denoising thing that NVIDIA's doing that just is like magic. Like when it first dropped in Cyberpunk, you see like a reflection of like the city on like a rainy streets, and that's just like with normal DLSS and ray tracing on Max, and it looked great, right? Like Cyberpunk looks great, and then they added this ray reconstruction thing, and you go from previous to like what it looks like now, and like the reflection detail is like so much crisper. The lighting, the ray trace lighting looks more realistic because it it's like a thing that just increases the detail of everything without sacrificing performance.
Yeah. Well, they'll come out with some form of software
they'll
to
have to
accompany this, I reckon.
But also as well, like that's still a small percentage of games. So the 8800 XT at 4080 levels of performance for half the price is going to be amazing if all you're doing is playing like, just Call of Duties and shooters and like just, God of War or whatever the case is, like big games on PC that are coming out. Then it's going to look incredible, yeah. And it'll force NVIDIA to be competitive with the 5070, right?
Yeah.
And this will be the first time AMD comes out first, right? It's usually 4090, and then a month later, here's the Radeon one, here's the 4070, and now here's our mid-range one a couple of months later. You know what I mean? Like that's how it's been for a couple of generations now, at least.
Yeah.
So if AMD come out first with here's our 8800 XT, we're not doing a flagship, but we're going to shake up the mid-range market, then that forces NVIDIA to be second, to look at what they're doing and respond. Whereas NVIDIA kind of like currently sets the benchmark of like, this is what we're doing, and we're increasing prices, and we're pushing performance to this level, whatever this is what we're doing.
Yeah, it's almost like AMD's reacting to NVIDIA instead of them being the aggressor.
And NVIDIA will never come out and say we're reacting to the 8800 XT. And when they launch a 5070, they're not going to say this is our answer to that. Like that's never going to be the case. But behind the scenes, they're going to be reacting to it. They're going to see what AMD is doing, and they're going to look at their 5070 performance and tune it. If it wasn't, like let's say the 8800 XT at that price is faster than what they were planning to do with the 5070, right? Then maybe they go, okay, we're going to have to just show that we're better at this price range in terms of performance, or we're going to have to match it. We can't be slower.
Yeah, they'll probably roll out an update that just give like 5% more performance, just so it's just a little bit more faster than the 8800 XT. That would not surprise me at all. But let's move it along, but keep it on the graphics cards and talk NVIDIA's RTX 4070 re-release. I know
this is something we've covered. Yeah,
Hey.
like there's been a few news stories for this for a while, but now it's finally out there. So there's a new 4070. Yep.
Yeah, and we talked about this off camera, and I know that you think it's a slightly overblown story. I feel a little. I mean, yeah, you could say it's overblown, but I also think I expect more out of third most valuable tech company on the planet. And also, if this was any other product, I feel like people would be very upset and they wouldn't be coming to NVIDIA's defense. So here is what has happened. So NVIDIA has confirmed it is releasing a GeForce RTX 4070, and the only difference with this card versus the one that is currently available on the market is that it's using GDDR6 memory and not the 6X memory, which is faster and more it's more pricier.
Basically, the 6X memory is what's in the 4070 and every other GPU higher than that, up to the 4090. Yeah. And it has been the 6X they introduced with the 30 series, and it was, I think, the 3080 at that point plus was like the fastest 6X memory. Mm-hmm. And that comes into play when ray tracing, like memory speed, more so than capacity, seems to affect ray tracing performance. Like noticeably, like you can see it like with like the same sort of like memory spec and things like that. But to play devil's advocate, this is like essentially like what happened. Like the first rumors was that there's a GDDR6X shortage, right? So there's there's a shortage of these memory components. There's a shortage because they're being put into the high-end GPUs that are selling really well, but also there's a production unforeseen shortage. The 4070 is currently one of their most popular selling cards. So because it's like the volume of it, they decided that for that GPU, they're going to switch to readily available GDDR6 memory and a fast version of that, but not as fast as GDDR6X.
Yes.
Basically.
And NVIDIA states that the new card will have, quote, similar performance, which means it won't be identical to the GDDR6X.
It'll be identical in a lot of games, but
it'll fall within 5%, because if it had the identical performance, they would have said it, and we can only go off what they say.
Yeah.
Moreover, the GDDR6 variant doesn't have any special naming, and this is my main gripe.
You don't know which GPU you're getting.
It is literally marketed as the exact same graphics card when in fact it isn't. The performance will fall within less than 5% on average of the one that is currently available on the market. And I would say if this was a box of donuts and you were going and buying a box of donuts, and you go to this same spot every Wednesday,
10 out of 12.
Yeah, you get 12. And then one day you go get this box of donuts, open it up, and there's 5% of them are small. Like they're 5% smaller. But they're marketed as the exact same, and they're the same price. NVIDIA says that they are pricing this similar, or at their target price for this is the RTX 4070 GDDR6X MSRP. I don't know how you can not you specifically, but anyone can defend this. I hate naming of tech. It is unnecessarily complicated for the end consumer, and this is only making it more complicated. And also, NVIDIA doesn't have in place a mandate for AIBs to inform consumers that this is a different card. This is, I think, deliberate subdivision.
They've done this like a few times, and there's some technical information for GPUs that are just always hidden unless you fire up, GPU Z or whatever it is, and you see what chip is there, if it's like a new chip and stuff like that. They've changed chips in the past, and they haven't changed product names, which is okay. But I get the 5% being within the margin of error is probably why. But I think they should have dropped the price by
5%.
5%, or even
proportionate to the performance.
Yeah, but even like a 5% discount, which would bring it down by like $20 US, would have been like a good move. But we haven't seen prices drop in any gaming related hardware for years.
Mm.
Yes, there are GPUs that drop in price, like AMD has dropped prices, they've rejigged prices and things like that. But for consoles or NVIDIA GPUs, they haven't budged in so long. And some of that just comes down to they want to make the most money they can, which is what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that the cost of manufacturing has just gone up. And there's just a point where that's why with the 8800 XT being half the price of the 4080 is there's a good chance that it won't be half the price, that they might have to bump it up just based on the more advanced node, and it's just going to cost a lot to make regardless. There's just a point where it's just they can't actually sell things at a loss. But I think NVIDIA's markups for their GPUs is probably huge, right? And I think they could probably sell the 4070 this version for a lot cheaper, because GDDR6 memory is cheaper to obtain than 6X. So I would think that it's cheaper to produce this card.
That is all very true. I just don't think it excuses you naming the card the exact same name. Listen to how ridiculous these names are. They're NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4070 GDDR6 8 gig. That's the name of their product. It's it's whatever. It doesn't matter. It is Like you go up to like my mum or dad and be like, hey, did you get the NVIDIA GeForce? Like it doesn't even make sense to read that unless you already know what it is. So I think it is wrong, and I think it's deliberate, because if this is like an accident, well then it's happened in the past numerous times. And look, NVIDIA isn't the only culprit for this. This CPU's naming structure, they recently changed this. I think it was when they went to Zen, like they changed the number indicator for where it lies in the performance stack, and it's like now everyone has to relearn how to look at the stack of CPUs in an ascending performance order. What are we doing? Like this is the third most valuable company on the planet.
Specifically to this decision, like one way that they could salvage it, not salvage it necessarily, but would make more sense is if you're going to keep the same price, right? Let's say like that's what you're doing. You're not changing the price. It's just different memory and it's almost similar performance, right? So it's similar, it's slightly slower, but it's the same price. Now, to salvage that, they could say, okay, the price isn't changing, but the margins for AIBs, they're going to get the benefit out of it, right? So the price hasn't changed, but they're going to make more money, or whatever the case is.
Why would we want that?
And if that's the case, then AIBs can then lower the price, and they can start competing directly with themselves. Then
okay, so the AIBs pick up the cost.
Yes, because then they can drop the price of their Ventus 2X, whatever. MSI can drop the price of that by $20 and still have the same margin as selling it for $500. And then these entry level models can become cheaper, and then that kind of solves that problem of the price in a way. Without NVIDIA, NVIDIA doesn't have to do anything, right? Because the MSRP hasn't changed, because there's so many variants out there that if you drop the MSRP, then the Strix version has to come down by a certain amount. Yep. Everything has to adjust. Yep. But if you just say the price is the same, it's cheaper to produce, and so now AIBs, when you're buying these GPUs from us, it's now X amount cheaper, but the price hasn't changed. So they either you make more money off it, or you can now drop the price.
I just want to help the end consumer. I don't think, if you're into PC parts, but I'm not even into PC parts, if you're interested in PC and you know that, okay, the 4070 is the most popular, like say you just check the Steam hardware survey, you're like, oh, I heard of this thing.
Yeah, the 4070 is selling really well. This is like the reason why they're not changing the price, and the reason why they're switching to GDR6 because of the shortage, and so they've chosen that GPU because it's selling really well, and maybe that's like, okay, we can turn this into a profit, and that's basically what they've done.
Yeah, but it's not thinking about the consumer.
No
one's thinking about them. They're buying a different product from what they're reading on the Steam hardware survey. Literally a different product. Yeah, okay, you get within 5% of the frames that you would get with the one that you were going for, but it is by definition a different product. It's got a different memory in it. And all they needed to do to make me happy here was just make AIBs, put that damn sticker that Manly did on their box, because they actually give a shit about the end consumer and what they're purchasing. Manly has put on their boxes of their 3 RTX 4070 GDDR6 cards a sticker that states it's 12 gig of GDDR6. That's it. That's all we wanted.
Yeah, that's all right. That guaranteed that should be on there. It should mention specifically that it's not GDDR6, because if you're looking for that, if you're in a PC store and you see like a wall of 4070s, which is what you kind of like see these days because that's one of the popular cards, you want to look at the different boxes and go, okay, why this one and this one are the same price? But you go, oh, but this one's got 6X, this one's 6. Then you want to be able to tell the difference. Yes, 100%. And to be honest, like that sounds like that should be mandated by
non-starter,
like the Australian consumer
100%
protection, like that should be like, well, you have to tell people what you're selling them. Yeah,
you can't sell a different product with the same name.
But I 100%. But then at the same time, I can understand.
Why they like to make money,
because it's within the margin of error. So okay, right? Yeah. Because there is also like the silicon lottery, right? Like there's going to be somebody's 4070 that's 3% faster than mine.
Yes. Yeah.
Just because of the the bin is like a higher yield or a higher,
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
true.
a better version of the actual GPU.
That is
just
very
that
true.
that happens for CPUs as well. Like, and if it is like 2 to 3%, then I think that's okay.
Yes, but it's also, I think we should expect more out of these companies, and I think it's been going on long enough, and I'm not the only person that is just like crying out about how bad these naming structures are for product stacks. It is unnecessarily complicated, and doing stuff like this only makes it more difficult to understand and follow. And I think that is just, it's bad for people that want to get into PCs, because they're like, oh, this is so cool, like I love all this stuff, and then they look at all the names for all the products and they're like, I actually don't even know where to begin. Because when I first started this job, that's how I felt. I was like, what does all of this mean? Like, this is just, it's so mustardy. It's so like, oh, it's all acronyms. It's all terminology. It's, you have to know this thing to know that thing. And then like a re-release of the different product with the same name, it's only making things more confusing.
I know, like having like a 60 Ti, 70 Ti, 70 Ti Super, 4080, 4080 Super. Yeah, like it just, it just muddles things. And I agree, like they need to figure out a way to make it easier to understand, because unless, like, I mean, if you've been gaming for decades, you know the 60 series is the mainstream one. You know the 70 is the sweet spot.
Yep.
You know the 80 is like, yeah, you got some money in your wallet and you want some serious performance, get the 80. And now they've added the 90, which is like, well, hey, you know, sky's the limit, baby.
Sky's the limit, baby. All right, let's move on to the next story. Talk to me about this game-changing OLED tech, and then we're gonna have to run through the last couple of stories. But yeah.
Yep. Okay, so we both love OLED. We both have LG OLED TVs.
Yeah,
we both have OLED gaming displays. I've got the MSI 4K one and the QD OLED technology. As you know, adding that QD layer has improved the brightness, and now they've got text clarity. You know, there's OLED.
I thought that one's Samsung. I thought that's the 3rd generation Samsung panel.
Yep, that's right. Yep. All right, so and LG has their WOLED panels, right? So
yes,
we don't we don't want to get too into the weeds, right? But we know OLED is great because you've got infinite contrast.
Oh, that's so good.
You have infinite contrast because pixels don't fire if it's a black. So you have perfect black levels.
They be off.
It's a game changer for gaming, because games just look better on an OLED. Like the same game looks like a generational upgrade on an OLED compared to like a mid-range LCD, right? It's just a fact. Okay, so OLED is basically, everybody's investing in OLED, and people that think that mini LED or micro LED, that's so far away because it's so costly to produce, and still is, that LG is investing on brand new OLED technology, right? And they're calling it Dream OLED technology. And what does this comes down to blue phosphorescence, or PHOLED, which is phosphorescent lighting to light the pixels. Okay, so what does this make? What does this mean? So when it comes to RGB, you got red, green, and blue light, right? So blue light is not as, based on like the waveform of like a blue light, right? It is just not as prominent as red or green, which means it's not as bright. And for OLED, which is all about organic matter, one of the issues with OLED, or not issues, one of the things about OLED is that it runs hot, right? It generates heat, and they've worked out ways to minimize that, which leads to burn-in and stuff like that. So to make blue light brighter, you're basically producing way more heat. And QD OLED adds a quantum dot layer to increase the brightness, and it's a way to do that. So essentially what LG has developed is a way for that blue light to not only be way brighter, but way more efficient in terms of like the heat and how long it's going to last, and it'll minimize burn-in dramatically as well. Awesome. And it could essentially just solve all the issues with OLED in one fell swoop. OLEDs will be twice as bright as they are now.
Wow.
Up to, let's say, or even 50% brighter, which is going to be huge, right? And it's not only that, it's going to run cooler, and it's going to require less tinkering with layers to try and bring the blue light up and to do all sorts of craziness. And it's going to affect HDR. It's going to make HDR way more vibrant on OLED. LG says this Dream OLED panel technology that it's been working on for a while is now in the testing stage. So they are testing it on displays. And they think that if all goes to plan, that it'll be basically fully ready for production within a year.
Wow.
Which
This
means
is
that
awesome.
OLED panels, this will be basically OLED 2.0. Or basically just, it's all about like the blue light, and they've figured out a way to make blue phosphorescence the main way to light the panels. And if they do that, and like this comes out, basically OLEDs, if you have this 2.0 OLED, it's just going to look just way brighter than the existing one. And it's going to be less, it's going to be more efficient, use less power as well.
Love it.
And yeah, so it's purely technical, but this is basically it's going to make existing OLEDs feel like, oof, I should really need to upgrade.
Oh God, I'm gonna have to upgrade again. Yeah, this reminds me of that story we talked about. It would have been several episodes ago. It was a team of I sent you the link on Messenger. A team of researchers, the University of Cambridge, proposed a solution to burn-in. Which enables better control for blue light emitting diodes. The researchers explained that encapsulating the light emitters in alkaline straps would not only cut down on the burn-in, but also make the manufacturing process more efficient. That was pretty much the entire story, and that it wasn't really coming to production, but it did remind me of that, is like getting a way better handle on the blue light emitting diodes will enable a much higher quality OLED panel. And burn-in, reducing
This
burn-in.
is like almost like the Achilles heel. It's like, it's like blue light for like an OLED. It's just, it has always been. And, Samsung's way to fix it is like the quantum dot layer and firing, having that layer handle that side of it to improve brightness, which works. Whereas this one is like way more pure OLED. So it would affect the kind of like the clarity of the image as well. Like it will actually look better too. Like colors will be more, even though OLED is amazing now, right? Like it's hard to imagine.
It's unbelievable.
It's hard to imagine OLED being better, but this solves one of the key issues that also leads to like burn-in and degradation over time as well. It will slow that. It'll make them brighter. Burn-in will be less of an issue. And it's just going to be better for HDR, better for gaming, and just better overall. And it's kind of like a next-gen OLED, which kind of means that this will be the tech going forward. If LG nails this, I don't think micro LED displays will become a thing.
Yeah.
No, I think everybody's just going to go all in on
They're
OLED.
so expensive as well. Like for what they are, like, yes, they look fantastic. Micro LED still looks fantastic. But like when I was buying, because that TV is probably a month old now, there was a micro LED right next to that thing. And I was in my girlfriend's ear being like, well, I can't walk out of here with that. I got to walk out with the OLED. I have to get the OLED. Look at the blacks. Look at it. But there was similar, like, not similar priced, but like, it was still thousands of dollars. And I'm like, I may as well get the OLED at that stage because it's just going to look so much better.
You're paying now for all this additional technology too, because this could bring the cost down once they nail it in terms of like production, right? Because what you have to do for all these displays or even LCD displays, like why does this like $500 65-inch TV exist when it's the same LED technology as this high-end Samsung QD LED TV, right? Or QLED TV. And the reason comes down to like having 10,000 backlight zones, quantum dot layers, this and that to improve the brightness of certain pixels and colors. And it's so technical and so much effort goes into to get the contrast levels and the brightness and all that sort of stuff down pat, that if you're able to solve it at the base level, which is what LG is doing here, then you've basically set, like you almost like eliminated the need for certain things to sit on top of the technology to enhance it. Yeah. And we've kind of like Apple's approach was to basically put two OLEDs in one, right? Like that's how the iPad was able to get 1500 nit brightness, right? Because it's so expensive because you're getting two OLED panels, pixel shifting or whatever they're doing to just fire, a super high refresh rate, like double. It's basically like, 2 OLED panels together.
Yeah,
and
stacked.
LG has this technology as well where they've started to, I think they've teased a laptop with it. I can't remember, but they've teased something with like that technology where it's basically 2 OLEDs because that solves the brightness issue which you need for a tablet. Because if you can't use your iPad outdoors now, you've got a fancy OLED display, but the brightness means that it's all dim outdoors, because that's what brightness is all about for bright rooms. Right? If you're in a dark room, you don't need 2000 nit brightness.
Yeah.
But you need the brightness just for HDR, the HDR effect when it comes to movies, right? But for everything else, you need the brightness just to be able to use your PC. If you're in a super bright room, if you're outdoors, you need brightness on your phone to hit 1000+ nits just so you can see it in daylight. And, you solve that issue with OLED now by stacking them, stackable OLED panels, which is what they do. Whereas this solution is like, no, well, we're actually going to change how we do the OLED tech. And that's what LG is doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm very excited for that. I can't wait to see what they look like and just how bright they get. Let's just take a guess. So average nit brightness on OLEDs right now for gaming monitors is 250. What do you think we're going to jump to?
Oh, but that's SDR brightness.
Oh, that's like SDR. Yeah, okay. Well, 1,000 for HDR. Do you think we're going to see 2000 nit OLED gaming monitors?
I think we'll just start seeing.
That's a lot.
1000.
That's a bright monitor.
Yeah. It tops out, right? I think once you get to HDR 1200 or 1400,
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
HDR primarily, that's what it's for. That's just like a flash. That's like, and also it's like uniform brightness. So like when you say like 300 nits, 300 nits is the whole screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So OLEDs can hit like about 700, 800 isolated spots, right, for HDR and stuff like that. And the current OLEDs that hit that are really, that's decent for movies in HDR, but it's not ideal because HDR really pops at about 1000. That's when it's game changing.
That's really good, man.
Like my first time I went to CES, it wasn't an OLED panel, right? Like LG, it was NVIDIA that had 2 monitors side by side. It was Call of Duty. It was like a nighttime mission.
Yeah, you've told me that. Yeah,
and it was like one display was just like the normal HDR 400, right? Which is a joke because like just don't even turn HDR on.
Yeah, don't even.
And then they had the HDR, like I think it was like 1400 or something like that next to it, and it was like an explosion, like at nighttime where you like like a building blows up with like fireworks. Like you could almost. Like, subconsciously you felt the heat from the explosion. That's how bright it was. You're like, oh, okay, like I can feel, like, you're not actually feeling the heat, but you're just like reacting because that's how impactful it was. It just looked like nothing to like, okay, wow.
Yeah.
And if they bring that level of wow to OLED displays, then it'll be a game changer for HDR because I still think HDR is not that. I don't even turn it on in for PC gaming.
No, neither do I.
I don't even turn it on for movies now because I like the OLED hitting 700 and like most gaming displays now are HDR 600 max, which I still think isn't
not good
isn't
enough.
quite there. I don't like it looks okay, but it's like nah. Like I just turn it off because I don't think it's doing justice to what HDR is capable of, and the trade-off is
sometimes worse. Sometimes it makes the image look worse.
Yeah, it just looks worse. And also it comes down to like the game being optimized for HDR. Like that's a whole other thing for gaming. It's like some games, like it doesn't matter how bright your display is, just look bad with HDR because like everything is just out of whack.
The Windows inbuilt HDR.
Oh yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, that's no good. Yeah, we're running out of time here. So let's just wrap up on the Doom.
$200. Controller?
Yeah, Doom, the $200 controller and Doom.
Okay, so Doom runs on everything.
Literally.
This is id Software's 1993 FPS classic. There was like a recent story, I couldn't find it. It was like they got Doom running on like organic cells or something like that, running at like 1 frames per second. Remember that? There's like Doom running on like, like calculators and whatever. Like Doom it's
was
almost
made
like
inside of Minecraft. Did we do that story as well?
Yeah. There's like Doom in absolutely everything. So this is Doom running on basically nothing really because it is... Did I have the story here? Did I actually put it in the show
Yeah, I've
notes.
got it. AI creates playable version of the original Doom, generating each frame in real time.
At the top there. Yeah. So this is from Google Research. They've created Game Engine. It's what's called NGEN, which is basically a game engine, like, Unreal or whatever the case is, but not that, right? Because there's nothing being physically rendered by a GPU or a CPU on a frame by frame basis. So the best way to think about this is like Stable Diffusion, and it's actually built off of some of that technology. So, you put the text prompter, give me this, and it gives you an image, right? And there is also video generation, but video generation gets funky with AI, as we know. Like, like there's videos of like gymnastics where it's just AI is just doing silly things, like it just doesn't understand, physics, because it's just generating an image, right? Like there's no physically based things actually happening. So what this engine has done, like, there was AI agents trained on playing Doom over and over, different difficulties, different play styles, just keep playing Doom. And then the AI model or the game engine technology is, trained on that data over and over. So what this means is that it only runs at 20 FPS and not at a super high resolution either. But basically you can play Doom where it's almost like Stable Diffusion or Copilot. It's like, you press every movement you make, it's generating an image or like a frame for the video.
Yeah.
And it's doing that in real time at 20 frames per second, so it's not fast.
That's crazy.
So it's just, and so like there is like obvious AI weirdness going on with the video. Like there's a video that you can see probably on the screen now, and like you see some of the like characters and like some sort of like weirdness happening, but it is like Doom. Like it looks like Doom. Like you see like the armor and stuff like that, and the fact that it's like drawing things as you move and turn, like it's figuring out like the environment of where to place things. So it's actually not like it knows the map, right?
Yeah.
And then you turn right, so then it's generating what you should be seeing at that point. So you're not actually moving in an actual 3D game. That's what makes it kind of weird.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to wrap your head around what you're seeing because it's 100% AI generated. It's running on an MPU.
This is cloud gaming next gen.
Yes, yeah. This is
next gen cloud gaming. It's like instead of you, I suppose. I mean, you would still be downloading the frames, right? But you would have like an AI director.
Yeah, but like I don't know, like if it's really that practical, because it's like, well, why don't you just render this on a GPU? Like if you're rendering this on, if like you got a 4090 with a powerful GPU that can do like how many teraflops or tops of trillions of operations per second, or like, whatever the AI number is, right? And this will run natively on that, but you could just run the game on the GPU. The CUDA cores, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't need to run some AI generated version of it, but
I'm trying to think of the application for this because this is crazy.
Because they've used Doom for that very reason that, Doom is something that we all recognize as being able to be ported to anything, and like getting to see different versions of Doom, you kind of get a sense of the technology, right? So this is low resolution, 20 frames per second, but it is Doom, and it actually looks pretty realistic. Looks real, like real Doom being played in a sense. But then, Doom ports to like old consoles are like terrible. Like this is kind of like that. Like, you've got a reference to say like, oh, this is like the Mega Drive version of Doom, where it's like super low res or whatever the case is. But it's impressive.
Very impressive. It's very impressive that they were
it's
able
like
to
Google
do
Research. This. Yeah, and they put a research paper up, and it's all technical, and they go through how they've done it, and yeah. So like AI generated, we've seen AI generated images, AI generated video. And now we're going to start probably seeing these AI generated games like Mario. Like somebody could take this technology and obviously infringe on copyright, right?
Oh yeah.
And release like like an AI generated version of Mario 64 quite easily.
What is that Sony? Is it called the Blade? Or is it is it the Blade? The Sony, where it's not actually rendering on the device itself, it's streaming.
Oh, yeah. They're handheld for the cloud gaming thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you reckon this kind of tech could be implemented there? No?
Yeah,
but you run a large language model
on
the PlayStation, it like the
there's no practical like it's hard to imagine a practical application for this right now, because what this means is that the game already has to exist, right? So instead of rendering the game on hardware that can render the game quite easily, you're training using insane amounts of GPU horsepower and AI power to train on this one game just to recreate something that already exists and looks better and runs better natively on things. You know what I mean? Like you just So like if there was an actual, like you have to actually get the game running on hardware to be able to train this AI. So like the next step would be using this to actually create a brand new game for the AI to know, for like, let's say EA has this technology, right? And it's trained on every single version of Need for Speed that's ever been made. And then you have Need for Speed AI, right? And it runs off the cloud, or it runs on a powerful GPU with an NPU, and it runs in a browser, whatever the case is, and it's not actually being rendered as a normal game. So what this AI, it's been trained on every single Need for Speed game. And from the menu, select, I want a most wanted style race. It's like, okay. So I'm just going to make it up. Yep. I'm going to make up the car. I'm going to make up the environment or the track. So every time you play, it's something brand new, AI generated, and different every time.
So this really is an upgrade to procedurally generated worlds.
Yes. Yep.
Rather than a direct rendering of select titles.
This is just like a showcase of the tech, because it doesn't make practical sense to say this is Doom AI now. Like it's not a product you can sell, because there's no real reason for it to exist. That's an interesting
way of doing that. They could do that. I mean, Need for Speed, I can't really see them doing with that, but that example, that opens up the door to many different franchises taking on some kind of
it's like procedurally generated endless thingos, where it's like, but it's
maybe
not
like
just
a Nintendo
generation.
world. Maybe like a Nintendo world. I could see something like that where it's kind of like the hub of, you remember the hub of the Wii? Yeah. Where you would walk around with all the Miis, but instead, like the new Nintendo Switch 2's hub is like this procedurally generated Nintendo world that is a game. I mean, I hate those menus, but you know those menus in games where you got to run to the other side of the the main city or something just to access settings.
Oh yeah,
that
Like sometimes
crazy.
That used to be kind of like cool, just because it was it's like a gimmick, right? I remember like there was other cool things where like during a loading screen you get to like play like some like weird like old school 2D game while the game loads, when games used to take ages to load and things like that. Like this is interesting technology, but I think it just like it's another example of AI is going to be used for game development at some point, to be able to maybe like if it's not generating the entire, like if it's not generating the frame, but then all that data for the frame is then sent to your GPU to render the frame, so it's not as low resolution or a bit glitchy or whatever the case is. There is like still physics. The physics runs off your CPU. Like the physics is separate to the AI. Like I think like AI will have to be complementary, but this is like AI. What if AI generated the entire game from scratch? And like this is the result, and it's impressive, but there's no real practical implementation for it yet.
Yeah, you're right. Well, let's wrap up this episode with the Razer controller.
Do you want to spend $200 US on a controller, Jack?
Obviously.
Of course you do.
No, 200 US. That's so much money on a controller. What does it do?
Okay, what does it do? Like, it's it's the ultimate wireless esports controller for Xbox and PC. It's the Razer Wolverine V3 Pro. Costs $199.99. And it's packed with features, right? It's got a wired mode. It's got wireless. It's got low latency wireless. It's got rubberized grips. It's got like, you can change the sticks out for a different version. You got like extra buttons on the top, programmable. You got 4 back paddle buttons. This is where you get into gimmicky marketing speak, because they're calling them mouse click back paddles. So it's like the premium feel of a high-end gaming mouse in these back buttons, which doesn't really mean anything, because they're just saying that it feels like that. It doesn't specify that it's using any sort of advanced technology. But pro controllers, like Xbox has a pro controller, it doesn't cost this much, but it's like 150 or whatever the case is, the high-end one, the Elite, whatever it is. Sony has an Elite controller, so this is their version of it. That seems to be one of the most expensive controllers you can buy. I don't think there's... I mean, would it be nice to have it? Yes.
Sure.
But I don't think it's worth it.
You don't reckon?
No.
It comes with... Is that earbuds?
No.
What is that?
Like
they're
they're
additional...
the little sticks. You can swap the sticks out for like a taller analog sticks.
Right,
and they're like
okay.
Hall effect sticks that are like, drift free. But the thing is like Hall effect, which is what you call like, stick drift on like the Nintendo Switch and stuff like that, where the Joy-Cons, where they just move without you doing anything and have some controllers. Once the controller starts drifting, that's when you know it's done. It's done for that controller. It's like, like you go into the menu and it's like, it's going through the menu.
That drives me crazy.
Yeah,
I just end up, I remember on some of my previous, I mean, I would never do this now, but I would get the joystick and just go like that with my, just on my hand on top of it, and it would just like shake it around, and then I'll just wait. And I'd be like, okay, it fixed it for like 30 minutes. And then like after like a solid gaming session, it would go back to like drifting. And then I have to hit it again with the top of my palm. Yeah, it was aggressive.
Yeah. So that Hall effect technology exists on heaps of controllers now. And you don't have to spend this amount of money to get that. So yeah, I don't know.
Bit of Razer
There's
tax.
a cheaper version that's wired, that's half the price. Like I would say go for that. But then in 2024, you don't really want to be playing with a wired controller.
True. That is true. I'm still using a wired Xbox controller.
Oh, I use it on PC though. It makes sense
Yeah.
because you're so close to the PC that you just have it plugged in.
Yeah, that's it. That is it. Well, that is a jam-packed episode. This week, I'm not sure. Do we have anything in the pipeline for next week that we can expect, the listeners?
Some NVIDIA stuff. I'm fingers crossed I'll be able to go hands-on with Half-Life 2 RTX.
Oh, now that is going to be awesome. We also... Now, maybe we won't announce that because we don't know that is happening just yet. But yes, we do have some NVIDIA stuff in the works. Let's just leave it there.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you very much for listening to this week's episode. You can go check out, we are available on all podcast listening platforms. And if you are listening just to audio, go head over to the YouTube. There's some awesome graphics and videos that we put on screen for the games and products that we're talking about. Do you have anything to sign this week off with, my good friend?
No, we'll catch you next week with more.
There is a lot more. Oh, we should also say that we're heading over to China now that that's all booked in.
Yeah, courtesy of MSI, we're going to get a factory tour.
Yeah, so we will report back to you guys on the quality and insurances that MSI have on their motherboards. We'll take lots of good photos and videos as well, and yeah, we might do a little segment on the podcast of that, maybe a separate episode or like a shorter bit of content. But we'll definitely talk about our trip and, the motherboards, because I think we're being debuted or showed off something that is around the corner. The next generation that is around the corner. And I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, guys, for listening, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.